I found that the word competition tends to bring a lot of emotion, and there tends to be amongst a certain group of Baha'is the idea that competition is not a good thing. So hang on, we're down. Next. This is from Michael Kohlberg, Beyond the Culture of Contest, From Adversarialism to Mutualism in an Age of Independence. It was George Ronald, 2004. It's been a very influential book for Baha'i studies. And I was quite wary of this because I wanted to know where was competition, which is, you know, one of the most interesting, one of the foundations of free market economics, how he came to the view that competition was bad. And in fact, in his introduction, he says that there are two things: there's adversarialism and there's mutualism. Contest, competition, and confrontation are all expressions of adversarialism, and that's it. So competition is bad because competition is competition. So here, trying to work out what competition means, this is the implicit image that is drawn out from this text. Someone wins, someone loses. The fact that competition has been regarded as suboptimal was actually in the early part of the last century very common. And here is Albert Einstein, who was well known for his other intellectual activities, but he was also interested in economics, in socialism, and in governance. And here he was saying that a planned economy, which adjusts production to the needs of the community, would distribute the work to be done amongst all those who would be able to work and would guarantee a livelihood to every man, woman, and child. This wasn't just Einstein, this was almost a sort of, we would now call them a meme. This was something that ran through a lot of political and economic thinking at the beginning of the last century, and so it's being reflected in something by that Michael Kohlberg wrote. Now, there was a very significant systematic effort by one country to remove competition, and that is it was in the USSR. And right at the very beginning, here is war communism. When the Bolsheviks took over, it had four measures: nationalism of the means of production and transportation, in other words, moving all ownership to the state; the abolition of money; the imposition of a national economy as a single, on the national economy of a single plan, that is, remove all competition; and the introduction of compulsory labor. In fact, after war communism, very, very shortly, it was found that you couldn't abolish money, so money was reintroduced. But the idea that we could try and remove competition from the economy was a guiding theme throughout the Soviet regime. But this is what it led to. And I testify out of my own experience that it was actually a common working experience. This wasn't just a something that happened on high days and holidays or when there was scarcity. This was seen almost every day in going to shops where there was something. And this would have been typical in Moscow. You can see this is a sort of winter scene. They were selling something or other. And there would be 2 or 3 queues. You would queue to get something. Here would be weighed out. Then you would pay for it, and then you would go back and collect it. This was also a scene in Soviet Union, again, at the very same time. This is a covered market in Moscow, and it's a market. it was only for small producers, and you would go there. 4% of the arable land was used for these for this production, and it yielded 25% of all agricultural produce in the Soviet Union. It was also very expensive, but you can see it was a market. So now it might be argued philosophically that competition is different from free markets. And you can see why, for a Baha'i who was trying to say, oh, well, let's leave competition and not have any competition, and let's try and find ways that we can cooperate. You have to deal with Shoghi Effendi, who says that in the future markets will be coordinated. So markets are sort of okay in Baha'i understanding, but competition isn't. But the reason I'm showing you this slide is that this is an archetypal free market, and you will notice that there are a number of sellers who are selling almost the same things for people to choose from. You cannot get rid of free markets by coordinating if you eliminate some of those sellers, because which sellers do you eliminate? There is an element of justice that you cannot, and fairness that you cannot get rid of if you try and remove some of the sellers. So just quickly move aside from this. There is a difference between implied images and spiritual realities. Most people, when they hear the quote, money is the root of all evil, you know, look at it like this, that, you know, money is the root of all evil. But in reality, where it comes from, which is the Bible and 1 Timothy verse 6, it's the love of money or the lust of money. The spiritual reality is the lust for money. The physical reality is that money is something that exists for commerce. And I'm thinking that competition is one of those words in where there is a spiritual reality and a physical reality. Now, the etymology of competition is to seek together. It's not to be in rivalry. It's not to win and lose. It is competere. In other words, to strive together. And if you look at all of the sporting events where there's competition, you will see, this is, for example, the London Marathon. There were 43,000 people who started and nearly 43,000 people who finished. Of those tens of thousands of people, only 5 or 6 in reality had any chance of winning. So why did 40,000 people take part? For me, this indicates that there's another spiritual reality. Okay, within the Baha'i writings, is there something about competition? Well, actually there is. Baha'u'llah says, and it's Shoghi Effendi in Advent of Divine Justice, vie ye with each other in the service of God and his cause. Vie ye means compete with each other. It means compare yourselves, see each other to compare each other, try better than the other. This is part of competition, trying your best, comparing yourselves to others, and trying to have a way forward based on that competition. So what does this mean for how do we apply this? Well, I didn't want quickly to this is something that I think has to be absorbed and to rethink. So one of the things I wanted to rethink was Porter's value model. I use this as a financial analyst, and it's a way of finding the value and assessing the value of a company within an industry. And you will notice on the left-hand side, which is the standard model, everything is in terms of competition in a negative aspect, in a win-lose aspect. So bargaining power of suppliers, the threat of new entrants, the threat of substitutes, industry rivalry, and the bargaining power of buyers. So the value of a firm is diminished when there is intense industrial rivalry. The value of a company is diminished if there is the possibility of new entrants, or if buyers have so much power they can pull the value down the value chain towards themselves, or opposite, the suppliers can pull the value to themselves. Now, if we rethink this, the same industrial components, we can see that value is enhanced if there's intermarket communication. If suppliers support companies by offering credit or longer lines of credit, we can get, if instead of being threatened by substitutes, there is research into substitutes, if there is ease of entry into the market to welcome more participants, and if buyers help participants in terms of providing their pre-ordering, what would be the value of companies? Well, actually, the value of companies in that industry would be increased, not decreased, if all of these different components was shifted. So that's my ping pong. That is my 12 minutes. Thank you.
Fantastic. You've stirred a number of questions that are going to come your way. And I love how you use the bank. Is that a banknote background that you have there? Very financial on the slide?
No, it's yeah, I suppose you could say it's something from the from a banknote, but actually it's just a Mandelbrot spiral.
Fantastic. So Joachim, perhaps you want to start with your first and second question all in one, and data has a role to play, apparently. Joachim.
Yes, thank you very much, Richard. So my first question was that what really went wrong in the Soviet Union and also in other experiments with communism is that there's a lack of data to match supply with demand. But now with big data and also with artificial intelligence, we are better and better able to match supply and demand in very refined ways that make really the market mechanism look very crude and outdated. So
I completely disagree.
Okay.
And the reason why I disagree is because it moves the element of choice from the individual to some abstract set of bureaucrats, and it's the problem of calculating inputs and outputs is not just one of complexity; it's one of the quantities of data. And also in terms of innovation, it's very difficult to take into account new products, on a real-time basis. You have to continually change the models, and I think that it's simply, it's the difference between everybody making decisions for themselves and somebody making a decision for you.
Okay. And how would you set prices then? Because prices are in theory set where there's a balance and equilibrium between supply and demand.
No, well, that's a theoretical approximation that is never met in reality.
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing as a free market in one sense. So, for example, I'm preparing now my crockery. I'm a potter, and I'm making stuff for the Christmas market that will start in November. And the question for me is, what do I price my bowls and my Christmas tree decorations at? And the reality is that you use an algorithm. You start off with a low level of pricing at the beginning, and then you see how much people like each individual item, and you raise the price until people stop buying. And markets show, these sorts of maker markets show that prices change from year to year. So what is popular in one year is not popular the next year. A lot of it is to do with fashion. And therefore, pricing is actually done not in an equilibrium, but in a disequilibrium form. There is no equilibrium price. It's always moving. There's a moving target.
Thank you. So there's Stephen, then Kayhan, then Mahmoud, then Bill. If Richard's answers are quick, or otherwise we just skip to the end.
Skip 9. I'm not sure interested in the other questions.
Okay, great. So Kayhan.
It's not really. I'll try and tell a story very quickly, which is that I work in management consulting, and there's a very clear competitive and deliberate environment created inside the consultancy in order to drive performance. And a lot of times, I would argue that in the absence of any kind of spiritual or moral incentive, otherwise, it goes to the lowest common denominator, and there's a lot of sort of bad actions, denying information to colleagues and so on, in order to basically get your bonus, and so I think that my comment, I suppose, is that an awful lot of the thinking around competition denies the idea that why the sort of the morals and the why you're doing something has any relevance to the actions, and I think that's a fundamental mistake.
And that actually is what I've been trying to express, is that there is a spiritual aspect to competition that we need to take into account, and that just the win-lose aspect of it is not spiritual. And the win-lose one, which is a simple approximation and one that you can create mathematics around, is not the one that actually drives society and economics.
Mahmoud.
Maybe just to confirm what you said, I think we sometimes use terms of the past, assumptions of the past, for new ideas that we want to have, and one of them is again the either or. For example, we think that multiplicity of suppliers, as the picture you showed from the African market, is necessarily an issue of competition. But we talk about competition in other terms, as Kayhan just mentioned. So I think it is the question of what is the meaning that we are giving to competition, and what are the benefits of it. If you have, for example, a vying for quality by just one supplier, if there is enough in the market, do you necessarily need competition in order to use extra capacity to make even more of the same thing? If you do not abuse of your position, if for whatever reason you are the only supplier and you have the concept of service, do you still need another supplier just to increase the costs of individual ones? So I think, again, it's not either or, and we have to be careful, I believe, in not falling in the same dichotomies that we have in the world today.
I entirely agree, and I think that, just for this Christmas market, there are going to be multiple producers of Christmas tree decorations which are cheap, but all of them are different. And that gives people an opportunity to choose between what they want. If we say, oh, you only make Christmas tree decorations, then you simplify to what is a Christmas tree decoration, and you only sell one type. And that was the problem in the Soviet Union. There was only one type of meat, only one type of vegetable, only one type of, drink, and that meant that there's no choice.